Ah, my favorite is sanding again.
Garage time.
All right, it's finally time to paint the front bumper, or at least get it prepped for paint. This is something that I picked up years ago. This is a fiberglass front bumper. It's very lightweight, RS style. And if you remember a few videos ago, or several videos ago, I actually did a lot of work to this thing. It was too wide, and it didn't fit the car very well. So I ended up strapping it together and heating it with a heat gun, and basically flexed it into a more narrow position. So now I'm happy with the way it fits the car. I've been driving it around with this off color, but it's time to paint it, and yes, it's gonna be painted yellow. Okay, I'm gonna remove this closeout panel. This is just for the center mounted oil cooler. I'm gonna run an oil cooler there in the center eventually, but for now I'm gonna remove this, prep it separately. Actually, I think I'm gonna leave this piece black. Probably repaint it though. In general, this bumper is in pretty good shape. It's been painted before. It's just got a couple dings and scratches and stuff in it. And then at the bottom, it's not super important, but over here, there's a little digger out of the fiberglass, so I might do a little fiberglass repair on that. Big chip right there. Like I said, that's on the bottom. It's likely to get banged up, at least by me, probably running into cones and stuff. So a few minor chips in the paint, so we gotta do some sanding and then get this thing in epoxy primer. I'm just going to dig out some of the rough spots on this with a rasp, and then we'll go ahead and repair this with fiberglass. Just got to get that flaky stuff apart. All right, mix up some fiberglass. We'll get that covered up. I'm using the Total Boat epoxy resin. This stuff is more expensive, but it does work well for repairs. I'm gonna cut a small little piece here. I've got this pretty wet, and I've got two little pieces of cloth here. Just gonna sandwich that around here. Having trouble getting it to stay, so I think I'm gonna use these sticks here. Make sure it's nice and wet. Get it to lay flat here on the top. Lay flat here at the bottom. And then I'm just gonna squeeze it. Okay, this stuff's starting to get a little thicker now, but it's not fully set. So I'm gonna try to remove the sticks. Hopefully the glass will stay wrapped around the actual fiberglass. So let's see what happens. Nope, it wants to come off. So back under the sticks it goes. Just not quite ready yet, so give it some more time. Oh, come on. Kind of staying. Okay, I've had enough for waiting for this to dry, so we're just going to tape this thing in. There we go. I should have done that a long time ago. This has had some time to dry, so We'll peel off what we can. And the rest of that's just gonna have to get sanded. I usually go with 80 grit to start with, but because this is mostly finished, it's already been painted, I'm just gonna knock it down with 180 first, try to level it out. And because this thing is so curved, especially in these edges here, I'm using this soft block. It's gonna really conform to all the shapes. It's really flexible. So as I'm doing like these kind of corners, I can go at the same 45-degree angle and just get in here with this really rounded block. For some of the larger areas, you know, like here, I really want to make sure it's nice and flat, or even on this upper surface, I can use something longer. This one is just a piece of plexiglass, and I really use it to check the straightness, so it'll conform to the shape as well. So I'll be able to do some sanding with this, just highlight the highs and lows, especially on this kind of flatter area. We'll do something like that. So I'm gonna switch out this paper to 180, block it down, see what kind of attention it needs. That'll make sure it's nice and straight. The other thing to do before sanding is to hit it with some wax and grease remover and kind of get all the big bugs and marks off of this. Because if you don't, you're just sort of taking the contamination and you're rubbing it into the paint, and it could cause adhesion issues later. So I like to get it as clean as possible before you hit it with sandpaper. Ah, my favorite is sanding again. So this really reveals what is flat. This looked pretty nice and flat when it was painted. It's a light color, so it's hard to see the ripples, but it's clearly not flat. Once you take some hard blocks and you go over it, this is really showing what's flat and what's not flat. This is a process I used on my car, and I was pretty happy with this particular block. Go all the way here into the corners. And that's about as sharp as I can go. I find that the best time to really flatten out a surface is with the heavier grit papers and with really sharp paper. This is brand new paper. And it cuts right through the highs. Now I'm getting after this top surface. Just letting the sandpaper do the work here. I'm not pushing, and this stand is real wobbly too, so I'm just highlighting the highs and the lows. Let me show you a close-up of this. These reflections are going to be a little tricky to see, but that's definitely a high spot. Probably won't sand that anymore. And then it's just real ripply. You know, this dark area here is unsanded. That's a low spot. I got most of this pretty even right here. There's definitely a low spot right there, low spot right there. So this will hopefully go away with more coats of primer, but we may have to use a little skim coat of filler on those areas too. A little bit of a ripple right here. That's just the way it was painted before. So this looked okay before, but I want it to, you know, be as flat as possible. So that's how it looks. We can use guide coat on later stages too, but this is really just to prep it for some good epoxy primer to bite into it. It's real possible that I put some of these ripples in here when I kind of shrunk the width of this. That was where I put a lot of heat into the fiberglass to try to, you know, draw this corner in a little bit. Now it's pretty much time to go with the short block now. Just want to roll over this radius here. You don't want to go right down the radius or you'll just put lines in it. So you got to kind of cross it. And this thing, even though it doesn't look like it, it does squish down. It does follow the shape. Okay, as I was sanding along here, I noticed some hairline cracks. And I think it's been like this for some time. These cracks, I've already checked, you know, they don't go all the way through the fiberglass. They're usually just cracks in the gel coat. The gel coats are pretty hard. So unfortunately, this is a visible part of the bumper. There's a big paint chip right here. But I need to dig this out so it won't crack again, because if I just paint over this, this crack will reappear. Okay, some of the junk has been taken out of that crack, and this little corner here got a little void in it. So I'm just kind of improving the integrity of the gel coat, making sure we're not gonna have any cracks again in the future. This time I mixed in a little thickening agent. It's like, I guess little polystyrene balls. Creates a little thicker surface. So we're gonna put this on now, just fill in these cracks. All right, you guys know sanding is not my favorite, especially in the heat of summer. It's August, and August, September are the hottest months where I live. So doing manual labor in the middle of the day is hard, plus sanding. So I do have a fan. This is new to my shop. It's from New Air, and you can mount it on the wall or on the floor. And it's on the low speed right now, and it's just enough air to like kind of keep me from just sweating to death. And keeps me going on the sanding, makes it a little bit more enjoyable. This section here is fully sanded. It's now ready for the epoxy primer. All the shiny areas have been taken off. And then there's still some areas there that I am unable to sand because it just hasn't dried enough. I don't want to sand it and rush it. If it's gummy, it's just too difficult to sand. So a lot of that epoxy resin takes 24 hours to dry. So we're gonna let that dry before we really go into sanding that. That's mostly over here, but I did do a few spots, like right there's a spot. Down here is where there's most of that stuff. You can see it kind of dripped over the edge a little bit. And then this is the new shop fan by New Air. It's got 3 speeds. It's on the low speed right now, and that's in off position. It's not too loud, but when it goes to max speed, it blows a lot of air. That's max speed. And if it's in a distance, it's pretty good. It just kind of keeps the shop cooled down a little bit. Sometimes I point it up into the attic and it just kind of blows out a lot of hot air and keeps the whole garage cooler, believe it or not. All right, I wish I would have found those hairline cracks the day before when I did some of the other repairs with epoxy resin and with the fiberglass cloth. I didn't see it until I was sanding, and that just means I won't have time to let this cure overnight again. I started on Wednesday with those first fiberglass repairs, and then today's Thursday. I was sanding, found the hairlines, got to go and dig those out, put more epoxy resin in, and now it's too late for the video to get the epoxy primer on today. And that's okay. These things happen. You know, I'm pretty consistent about getting out in the garage and getting something done every single week. I haven't missed a weekly upload in over 2 years. And that's sort of the secret to success and getting your project moving along, is getting something done every week. Especially if it's sanding. You guys know sanding's not my favorite, and it just doesn't make sense to hurry through it, because if I was to try to sand that jelly epoxy resin, it's not gonna sand well. It's gonna get frustrating, and you could end up having it sink overnight, and then when you put the epoxy primer over it, it's now wavy, because you got to give the stuff time for the solvents to evaporate and get out of the way, so that when you do sand it, it remains flat. If you sand it too early and it doesn't shrink correctly, now you've just created a bodywork nightmare. So as much as I want to get this primered today, it's probably better to wait another 24 hours. I'm gonna put this thing outside in the sunshine. That's gonna help it cure too. The other thing is I might do another video midweek about Max carburetors. I had a problem. I was just driving the other day and I'm getting really lean mixtures and it's not idling again. And I know what the problem is. I think it's got a plugged idle jet. So I'm gonna do a quick video on how I fix it for good, because I've fixed the idle jet problem before and it's come back. So it has to do with the air cleaners, the aftermarket air cleaners. So I'm gonna make a fix for that and hopefully solve that problem once and for good. So check back with that. Take care, guys, and we'll see you maybe next week.